Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman. That's Jack Sommers. And Jack, here we are with another emergency edition of the podcast as the Diamondbacks trade Eugenio Suárez back to the Seattle Mariners, and they get three prospects in return. It's first baseman Tyler Locklear, right-handed pitcher Juan Burgos, and right-handed pitcher Hunter Cranton, all prospects in the Mariners system. Jack, of course, the headliner here is the first baseman Tyler Locklear, who made his big league debut last season and has put up some pretty good numbers here in AAA in 2025.
Yeah, he was on a heater for about a week just before getting called up to the Mariners, and he has not appeared in a game with the Mariners this year. He's in Sacramento right now, and he's about to, head over to the Diamondbacks locker room, I guess, in the morning. And so they'll move from there. But he'd hit like 5 home runs in 7 games and was hitting over 400. That really, upped his numbers. And so that power jag had him, promoted already. And I guess Bob Nightingale had tweeted, I think it was, that, Jerry DiPoto was bragging about Locklear and how well he was doing and raving about him at the Hall of Fame ceremonies. So I'm sure he was doing his salesman work there.
So Tyler Locklear, you look at his numbers in AAA this season, and they're pretty impressive. Locklear has played 98 games. He's slashed 316, 401, 542, 19 home runs, and 82 RBI. Granted, this is the Pacific Coast League. We're used to giving that caveat around here. The Mariners AAA affiliate is in Tacoma, though, which is definitely the most pitcher-friendly environment out of all of the PCL ballparks. So maybe not quite as extreme as what we're used to seeing for the D-backs in Reno. But what really stood out to me here, Jack, is that if you look at Tyler Locklear's numbers, something changed for him in the month of June. I went back and looked at his game logs, and if you use June 20th as a separator, the numbers are enormously different before and after that date. From the start of the season through June 19th in AAA, Locklear hit 282, 372, 427. That's a 799 OPS. It's not terrible, but it's also not great in AAA in a fairly hitter-friendly environment. But from June 20th to now, Tyler Locklear in AAA, 390, 461, 788, a 1249 OPS. Clearly, he made some sort of a mechanical change. I saw someone talking about this on Twitter who probably follows Mariners prospects more than I do. There's a tangible mechanical change that he made, and it appears to have made quite a difference. And Jack, I imagine that's part of the calculus here for the Diamondbacks, where they feel like they're getting a different player than maybe what Tyler Locklear was at the beginning of this season.
Right. By the way, the other thing here too is, they're filling first base. Right, where, they didn't really have a first baseman ready to go next year, unless you believe that Pavin Smith, Tristan English, platoon is the way you want to go in the future. And they just didn't have anybody in AAA or even in AA really that you can say is close and could get up here and help. So one of the things that Nick Pecora had written about recently, which kind of raised an eyebrow, but I wish I'd have focused on a little bit more, was the comment that they could target a position player or two. Whereas, the assumption has always been and that they're targeting controllable pitching, and we've talked about that forever. We kind of overlooked the fact that Mike was interested in a position player, and sure enough, the first big trade he makes of one of his bigger trade chips, he brings back a position player. So pretty interesting.
And I think you and I had talked about this with the Mariners as a potential trade partner. Obviously, the D-backs already made a trade with the Mariners for an asset you didn't expect to get as much for in Josh Naylor. But that was always going to be a challenge with these two teams on a Geno Suarez trade. The Mariners just didn't have that young pitcher who was close to the big leagues, but that you figured was actually available. You weren't going to get one of their established young starters. You weren't going to get Brian Wu. Logan Evans, we talked about, maybe you'd want him, maybe you wouldn't, but either way, I kind of doubt the Mariners would have made him available. And beyond that, the Mariners, for as good of a farm system as they have, they actually don't have very many pitchers near the top of that list, it was basically Ryan Sloan was the name that you and I kept going back to. Sloan is listed as the number 5 prospect over on MLB Pipeline, but he is down in A ball right now. And you're probably looking at, 2028, 2029 before you're going to see Sloan in the majors. And we know the Diamondbacks are not, that's not their priority right now. They want to try to fill out their rotation and fill out their roster in 2026 more so than they're thinking, several years down the road. So with the Mariners in particular, Jack, I'm not surprised it went this direction with a position player being the headliner asset for the D-backs.
Yeah. A couple other little points, interesting points about Locklear. He's had pretty heavy reverse splits. I was looking at his splits and, it's like 944 OPS. I'm sorry, 10,000 OPS against righties, 794 against lefties this year. 832, 788 last year, 944, 793 the year before that in 23. I always preach ignore reverse splits. They're not real. They don't last. And I'll stick by that. But what I can glean from this, a lot of times, younger players actually just aren't seeing enough left-handers. Because only the best left-handers get up to the majors. And, there's a pretty high attrition rate with left-hand pitchers, right? So I think that's part of it. Maybe, especially also growing up, going to school, high school, college, and all of that. And it just takes them a while. So some guys have pretty big reverse splits in the minors, and then all of a sudden they get to the majors and everything normalizes. And that's likely going to be the case. But the encouraging thing here then should be, as he sees lefties more, he'll probably get better against lefties, and certainly should be in a hold his own, more than able to hold his own category against right-hand pitching.
I think at this stage, what would maybe be concerning, if anything, is if there was a huge split and he was, great against lefties, but just not really doing anything against righties. You can deal with this. You can deal with a guy who has roughly even splits. You kind of figure that over time, the hitting against lefties is going to come. One other point I'll make about Locklear real quick, Jack. I made that distinction earlier between before June 20th and then after June 20th and how big of a difference the surface level numbers have. I want to take that a layer deeper and talk about some of the underlying numbers. I did a search over at Baseball Savant. His barrel rate from June 19th and before that was 5.2%. And from June 20th onward, 19.1%.
Wow.
The average exit velo was 88.3 before June 20th. After June 20th, it was 94.5. So you're talking about really, really significant differences there. I don't know exactly what the mechanical change was. I'm not going to try to speak on that with any authority right now. But I saw someone reference this on Twitter, and clearly there's something that happened there. And I have to believe that was a big factor here for the D-backs. I mean, on paper, Jack, it looks like two completely different hitters. This is a guy who's really, really done a lot of damage here recently.
So somebody just texted me a tweet from Oliver Bochter, who's a prospect writer and draft writer. And he's completely supporting exactly what you just said. Tyler Locklear adjusted a high, noisy hand load in early June. He quoted numbers since June 11th. His average exit velo went from 87 to 95. His hard hit rate went from 38 to 54. Barrel and launch angle have gone up. Previously hitting 265 with a 316, and then it went to 394, 784. So his start and after points were a little bit different, but a noisy hand load, high noisy hand load. So obviously, quieted things down up at the top there. So that's really interesting that there might be a specific mechanical adjustment that was behind this massive change.
The other thing I'll say about Locklear, for all the prospect list junkies out there, I know people, of course, are looking up Mariners' top prospects and seeing where Locklear ranks. He's at number 9 on MLB Pipeline. The Mariners had 8 prospects in the top 100, so Locklear is the highest ranked guy who was not on that list. He's not a top 100 guy at MLB Pipeline, but again, he's theoretically right on the brink of it. He's their highest ranked guy who isn't on that list. Over at Fangraphs,
no, wait, I just got to tell you, this is a total fail, Jesse. He's not in the top 100. It's a fail.
I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that this is a great trade. I think maybe when we get to the end of this live stream and the dust has settled a little bit for both of us, we can kind of gather our thoughts of how we
Sure.
actually feel about this thing. It's going to take me maybe a little while to really reflect. But yeah, Tyler Locklear is not a top 100 guy. The other thing I saw a lot of people referencing was that over at Fangraphs actually updated their Mariners prospect lists in mid-June, and they have Locklear. I believe it was the number 22 prospect in the Mariners organization. It was number 21 or 22, a 40 future value, which is not a particularly high number. But again, I go back to these numbers that you and I have just been quoting. That scouting report was published on June 13th, which is before Locklear made the adjustments that you were just talking about, and we've seen this enormous difference in the output. So I have to believe if Fangraphs was to do their rankings again today, maybe the numbers would look a little different.
Yep, for sure. I mean, they're kind of like the rankings I do. They're very much results oriented, right? I mean, I'm not a scout. I'm not out there watching these guys. I'm doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, which is looking at numbers and watching video when I can get my hands on it. And then talking to people that know more than I do. And then hopefully I can assimilate some of that information until I get a chance to actually see the player play myself see for myself on a regular basis. Once I get to see a guy every day, then I kind of can trust my ability to weigh what the numbers say with what I'm seeing and, see what passes a smell test and what doesn't. But if I haven't seen him play a lot, it's, you just have to go by what you have.
Ernesto in the chat said that Locklear's 18 stolen bases isn't getting enough attention. Something we should definitely mention. He has 18 stolen bases in AAA this year in 24 attempts, so not an outrageously good success rate there. But he does have 39 career stolen bases in 325 games. So at the very least, Jack, he's maybe someone that Dave McKay can work his magic with, right, over at first base. Maybe there's a few stolen bases to be had in the majors for Locklear as well.
Yeah, I mean, at least we know he's athletic enough to do that, right? I mean,
Sure.
Whether that translates into a stolen base total, we're talking about an athlete. I mean, he was a third baseman, moved over to first. The reports are that he's at least decent over there. So the fact that he can run a bit is encouraging as well.
Of course, defense is going to be a big factor for the D-backs as well. MLB Pipeline gave him a 45 on the 20 to 80 scale with the fielding grade. I think Fangraphs had a 60 future value, but a 30 present value in terms of defense. So it appears there's a ways for him to go, but that maybe there's some potential for him to settle in pretty nicely on the defensive side of the ball. Certainly for the Diamondbacks, that's going to be a point of emphasis going into next season. Of course, Jack, there are two other players here, which we haven't really talked about yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll start with Juan Burgos, a 25-year-old right-handed reliever who has pretty good numbers in the minors this year. Spent most of the season at AA, a 0.64 ERA there. He was promoted to AAA, spent all of 4 games there, 3 innings pitched. He allowed 1 run in those 3 innings. And then the Mariners recently promoted him to the majors and had him make his big league debut. He went 6 2/3 innings in the majors, gave up 3 runs, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts. The underlying numbers, for whatever it's worth, look pretty good in that stretch. I think he held his own well enough during his stint in the majors. Jack, what stands out to you about Juan Burgos?
Just a 96-mile-an-hour sinker with a pretty deep repertoire. He throws a lot of different pitches. So he's got velocity, and he throws quite a number of pitches for a reliever. So we'll see how that translates. They'll probably pare that down to 3, most likely, that he primarily uses. That's usually the way that goes. They'll figure out what he throws best. What stood out to me here was you texting me earlier saying that I think Burgos is the type of guy that the Diamondbacks would target. Now, why didn't you tweet that, Jesse? You could have got all that credit.
Yeah, I never feel confident enough about these things to put it out publicly, because then I risk being hated on by the people once inevitably that player is not in the trade. But here, apparently, I lucked out, Jack. And yes, Juan Burgos was part of this deal for the D-backs.
Right. So, look, I don't know much more than anybody else here does about him. Again, I've never seen him pitch. I've been doing the same thing everybody else is doing. But I think the point is that my co-host here is very much in tune with what the Diamondbacks are looking for. And so I think that's the key thing that we all have to remember here is, they have scouts with eyes on these guys. These are players that they've studied. I'm certainly not in a position yet to make any kind of, value judgment on guys that I don't know much about. I could pretend that I do, but I'm doing what you guys are doing and then just trying to understand and interpret the data. I like guys that throw hard and throw a number of different pitches, right? If it's guy throws hard and he's a 2-pitch pitcher and you eliminate the second pitch, then everyone's just going to sit on the fastball. So what I'm going to be most interested to see with him is which of his wide repertoire, which of his other 4 pitches does he hold on to and become effective with? Because we don't have any data on him. Like we don't have StatCast stuff from AA. He's got a few innings in the majors and a few innings in AAA, and so there's just really nothing to look at there. So we're just going to have to wait and see if he starts in the major leagues or starts in Reno, and then start really digging in on his data. So we'll know more later.
It will be interesting to see what the Diamondbacks decide to do there. He was promoted in late June up to the majors, and then he was sent back down to AAA on July 21st, so just a little over a week ago. He's not all that far removed from being in the majors. We'll see if the D-backs want to bring him back up or give him a little bit more time in the minors. As I said earlier, he's only pitched 4 games in AAA, so you could understand if the D-backs wanted him to get a little more experience at that level, even though he was totally dominant in AA earlier in the season. The other guy as part of this deal, Jack, is another right-handed pitcher, Hunter Cranton, 24 years old, selected in the 3rd round, 91st overall, just last season by the Mariners. He was a bit of an older draft pick. He's 24 years old now. And Jack, there aren't a whole lot of innings in the minors to speak of here. He has a 1.96 ERA in the minors, but that's across just 19 games. He is currently in high A, where he has a 1.13 ERA working out of the bullpen.
Yeah, and again, I want to hat tip our good friend Aaron Hughes one more time. He was the one that tipped me off to the fact that Cranton missed a lot of time due to getting hit by a comebacker. He was hit on the job by a line drive, and so that's why he missed a lot of time because of that, and that's why his innings totals this year are quite low. But he's got some great stuff. Yes, he's an older prospect. Again, people just opening up the book and seeing, 24-year-old in high A with few innings. But I wouldn't go by that. I mean, there's clearly got to be a reason why the Diamondbacks would target him. And I think some of the information that we've seen on him, his fastball can get up to 99. He's got 18 induced vertical break, or a little over 18. That's, some pretty impressive movement. This guy's got a big fastball.
Yeah, this stuff is definitely what stands out here. Looking at just some highlights from his collegiate career, it's pretty impressive. And this is a guy, it appears, Jack, the plan from the Mariners side was always to just develop him as a reliever. He hasn't started a game in the minor leagues, and you figure the D-backs will just follow that same course of action and try to bring him up as a reliever. And, maybe he's a big part of this Diamondbacks bullpen someday later on. Well, how do we feel about this? Do we feel like the Diamondbacks got enough here? We're going to talk about that on the other side of this break. Nothing says summer like long days, clutch plays, and firing off a few bets on the game, all with DraftKings Sportsbook. If you've never bet on baseball before, it's easy. Pick a guy to go yard, hammer some live odds mid-game, or just ride with your squad and hope for the best. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario, new customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Well, Jack, we are back here on Snakes Territory. Thank you again to all of you who are joining us here in the chat. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate all of you guys being here to support. Jack, I guess now that we've talked about each of these guys a little bit, we can step back a little bit and we can see the Diamondbacks acquiring the Mariners number 9, number 16, and number 17 prospects, according to MLB Pipeline, for a Eugenio Suárez. And we can ask the question, how do we feel about it? Did the Diamondbacks get enough in this trade? I'll start with you, Jack. What do you think?
I don't know.
That's
not
the correct answer, right? That's the answer if we're being honest.
That's not what I'm supposed to say. That's not what everybody wants to hear. But again, we're reacting to this with 45 minutes of knowledge on these players. I mean, I knew a little bit about Locklear, but not a lot. I knew nothing about the two relievers. And look, they're relievers that basically you're just going to have to wait and see how they play out. I'm kind of stepping back and trying to see bigger picture here. How do I feel about this trade in the context of the other two trades that have been made, where they picked up two relievers and a starter? Clearly, they're still pretty far off from their goal of getting controllable starting pitching.
Yes.
So I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed that in the trade for Eugenio Suárez, they don't have a controllable starter that they could just plug in a rotation. If not immediately now, somebody that looks really close that would be able to make their debut maybe out of camp in 26 or something like that. I mean, I was definitely hoping for that. So I'm a little disappointed that it's not that. But at the same time, there's a difference between hope and belief. And anyone that's been listening to this podcast knows that there's kind of a gap between what my hope and what my belief was going to be on the return.
Yeah.
So my expectations were already kind of at a level of about where we're at with this deal. So my initial reaction is, yeah, it's fine. They got a couple of potential relievers that are going to pitch in the major leagues at some point. I mean, I would believe that both of them are eventually going to be in the major leagues, and they got a guy that they can plug into first base tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that stepping back, this certainly, we can be honest and say that this is not what the Diamondbacks wanted, right? I think we can just kind of straight up say, based on the reports, assuming those reports are accurate, this return is not in line with what the Diamondbacks' initial ask was, or maybe even really all that close to it. There was a report from Daniel Kramer, who covers the Mariners over at MLB.com, saying that the Diamondbacks were asking for 2 of the Mariners' top 100 prospects. And Tyler Locklear, as I said earlier, is not a top 100 guy. So theoretically, the D-backs were asking for 2 guys that were more highly thought of than the best player the Diamondbacks got in this deal, at least on paper right now. So from that standpoint, it is clear the Diamondbacks had to compromise here. This is not what they set out for. On the other hand, Jack, there's also the perspective of the D-backs trading Gino back to the Mariners, the same team they acquired him from, which is kind of funny how that worked out. And from that standpoint, this trade is a pretty massive win. The Diamondbacks essentially acquired Gino in a salary dump, in late 2023. They sent the Mariners Carlos Vargas and Sebi Zavala, 2 assets who had very little value at the time, and they took on Gino's contract, and that was basically it. They gave up next to nothing for Gino when they made that deal. And here, they're clearly getting a whole lot more than that. So from that standpoint, the Diamondbacks, this whole Gino Suarez Diamondbacks arc has gone pretty well for them. He was exactly what they needed at third base here the last year and a half, and now they were able to cash in and acquire a whole lot more than what they initially dealt to get him.
I think I want to ask a question back to you, Jesse. Did they clear the bar of the value of the compensation pick? If you make the assumption that Gino would have got at least 351, maybe he doesn't quite get the full amount that Christian Walker would have got, but just say he gets 351, 3 years, 17 million average annual. And that gets you that first round pick. Did this trade clear that bar? Because that's been the bar that I set and that Mike Hazen set, that everybody has set. You've got to do better than the comp pick. Did they?
Well, I'll repeat what you said earlier in the show, Jack, and say, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, you have to see how this plays out, right? I mean, Tyler Locklear could be the Diamondbacks first baseman of the future for the next 6 years. Maybe he blossoms into a really solid everyday player that is a member of this team for a long time. If it doesn't go that way, then you're pretty dependent on two relievers. You feel like with the draft pick, you probably aren't drafting a relief pitcher that high in the draft. So it's hard for me to say definitively, Jack. Just on paper, comparing the value of the assets, I think they probably did clear it. Just given Locklear, how it appears he's really trended in a promising direction here in the last month or so. But I don't think it's obvious. I mean, I don't think it's like, oh, it's not even close. I wouldn't be comfortable saying that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can probably say they overall, through volume, cleared that value. I mean, Locklear was a second round draft pick. So it's not like, he was an 8th round pick who's
Sure.
kind of outperformed, and he's got the pedigree of a second round pick already. So that's pretty close right there. And the fact that he was performing in AAA, that makes him got to be pretty darn close to the value of, what that compensation pick would be, which would be between 28 and 32 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's a late first round or very early second round, however you want to kind of look at it in your mind. So then, it's the two reliever prospects. If one of them makes it to the show and, isn't terrible.
Burgos is probably going to make it, right? I mean, he was there like a week ago.
I shouldn't say if they make it to the show and aren't terrible.
Sure.
And, can give them 30 to 60 innings over a year over the next 3 years that are above replacement level relief work.
Sure.
Right. If you can get that, right. If you can get 180 innings, or 100 plus innings over the next 2-3 years above replacement level relief work, and Locklear sticks as a starter, then it's a home run for 2 months of Gino.
Totally. Yeah, and when you keep in perspective that you are just talking about 2 months of Eugenio Suárez, you don't necessarily need to get a franchise player in return. I don't think that was a realistic ask necessarily. Yeah, and I think Jeff also made a great point here, Jack, which is the fact that this fits the Diamondbacks' competitive window a whole lot better. If you do get the comp pick, maybe it does turn out to be a great player. But that player is probably not playing in the majors until 2028, 2029, 2030, depending on how quickly they can develop.
Right.
And the D-backs, it feels like we're in a position where they would rather have the guy who's ready now. This is a team that wants to contend in 2026 and has some genuine holes to fill. Like, as you said earlier, the first base plan post Josh Naylor is not clear at all. And obviously they have a bit of a hole at third base that they're going to have to figure out in the long run as well. So plugging that hole with a guy that you can just, run with out of the gate, I think is pretty helpful.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, the D-backs had to cough up Slade Ciccone to get Josh Naylor. Do you want him to give up another good pitching prospect to get a first baseman with 1 or 2 years of control?
Sure.
So there's that too. I mean, look, it's a roll of the dice, right? Locklear had 16 games last year, wasn't able to make it happen. He made some improvements this year. Let's see if they're real. This is a reasonable chance.
Yeah.
I would put it that way.
I think in terms of the watchability of this team, Jack, which is not necessarily a huge factor. I don't think it was the driving force in Mike Hazen's decision here. But the fact that Tyler Locklear is probably going to play tomorrow, or at least will be available to play tomorrow, we think, that's significant. I think it breathes a little bit of new life into the second half of this season, where D-backs fans have been understandably very miserable here lately. Things have not looked good on the field. And, there's no saying that Tyler Locklear is necessarily going to jump into the lineup tomorrow and, go 3 for 4 with 2 extra base hits or something. But there's something intriguing about getting to watch a young player who has potential who's been raking in AAA here over the last month and clearly deserves the opportunity that he'll get.
Right. There's a question in the chat from Boaz Whitbeck. So who's on third? Lawlar. As we mentioned a few days ago, Lawlar hurt his hamstring a little over a month ago. And Sean Larkin, not Sean Larkin, Chris Slivka told me that he would be out at least a month. So when I spoke about this 2-3 days ago, I mentioned that I would expect that the closest Lawlar is probably another 2 weeks. John Gambadoro actually inquired on this as well and said the same thing just now on Twitter, which is, he's getting close. In other words, he's probably getting close to baseball activities. Now, he's going to have to work out at the complex league, and there's no more complex league games that ended. So he can't rehab there, but I'm sure he's working out at the complex, at the Salt River complex, and we'll see how long it takes him to get back in the games. My guess, right? Don't expect to see Lawlar in the major leagues before September call-ups. That's what I expect, right? Because I think that he's probably a couple weeks out from getting in the games, and then he's going to have to play for a couple of weeks. And then they'll probably bring him up in September call-ups. So from now until September, you're looking at Blaze Alexander for the most part.
Yeah, that's a good call.
And they may, they may bring Tim Tower back at some point. If they feel like he's made any adjustments that they're asking him to make, Tower can play third base as well. So, if Blaze isn't performing well and Tower is doing well in AAA, they could make a switch there and give Tower a few more weeks and see if he's ready to make some improvements. And then by September 1, I would expect Jordan Lawlar to be at third base.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Good analysis on your part. We have a Mariners fan in the chat saying Locklear had been in the minors for a while now. I think if he was going to make it to the big leagues and be decent, he would have done it by now. We did reference earlier that Locklear did make his MLB debut in 2024. It did not go very well for him. He had a 535 OPS. It's quite a while ago now. But this is a valid point, Jack, that Locklear has been in AAA for quite a while. He played 70 games there last year and 98 games this year. So that's more than 162 games, 168 games altogether in AAA. So it is encouraging for sure to see this mechanical adjustment in June pay off the way that it has. I think there's definitely something to that intrigues me. At the same time, a hitter in AAA in a hitter-friendly league, you'd kind of hope that after 150 plus games that the hitter would start to make some progress.
Which he did.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Yes, it's 168 games, but he's made a lot of progress in AAA. I mean, he was a 2022 draftee. So it was kind of getting close to the, hey, now or never type thing. If it lasted much longer for him to kind of find it. But I certainly don't think a 24-year-old in his second go at AAA is, that's crushing the ball is too late. But sure. I appreciate that perspective because it is getting closer to that point.
Sure.
I talk about it all the time. Once you get over, whenever I cull my list, I mean, you get those 25-year-old AAA guys putting up monster numbers, and it almost never works out in the majors. So 24 is bumping up against it. Certainly would have been more reassuring had he been able to force his way onto the Mariners roster before this. They certainly had a need at first base, and he wasn't able to do it. So that's a legitimate point.
Absolutely. We got another comment in the chat that I'm trying to find here. Our buddy Jeff Irving. My question, though, is who is going to trade an MLB-ready pitcher for a pitcher? Made more sense to get the pitching from Gino. That's a fair point on Jeff's part. If you're trading Merrill Kelly, you're trading a Zach Gallen tomorrow, and you are trying to land that young starting pitcher that we've been talking about, the elusive young starting pitcher that we know the Diamondbacks would like, you figure it might be a little harder if you're trading with a team that clearly needs pitching. Otherwise, they wouldn't be dealing for one of those guys in the first place.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe this is where we get the infamous, package deal, and Zach and Merrill both go to the same team.
Wow.
To some team that's just being super aggressive, like this is our year, we're going to make it to the World Series. A lot of those options may be dwindling. I mean, we're seeing the Red Sox and the Astros, two teams that were looking for starting pitching, kind of moving in some other direction. So we'll have to see. Their market may be narrowing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very possible. On the starting pitching front, Jack, it feels like I still feel fairly confident that the Diamondbacks are going to wind up trading both of those guys. I know Gambo tweeted here in the last 30 minutes or so. I expect there will be a lot happening tomorrow. Brace yourselves. So that's certainly telling and makes me think all the more that those guys will be dealt. But the starting pitching market, Jack, has been very strange so far. We haven't seen a whole lot of movement on that front. It feels like teams are kind of going the discount route so far. We've seen Michael Soroka come off the books. We've seen Zach Littell from the Tampa Bay Rays was acquired earlier in the evening, but we really haven't seen any of those marquee starting pitchers go just yet. And obviously, that's kind of what the D-backs are waiting for. I mean, maybe you're not considering Zach Allen a marquee starting pitcher at this point in his career, but he has a big time track record, and the D-backs are definitely going to be shooting higher than what those teams got for those other pitchers earlier tonight.
Yeah. I do want to circle back to Eugenio Suárez.
Yeah.
I mean, what a year. 4 player of the weeks, a 4 home a game, 36 home runs, 87 RBIs. What a tremendous season. Yes, it was streaky, and yes, it was up and down, and yes, there were some things to be left desired on the defensive side. But man, just watching him step forward and pull yet another blast into the left field bleacher time and time and time again. It was fun. It was a lot of fun to watch, but it was even more fun getting to know him and interact with him and just see the kind of person that he is. I've said this before in the blog, and just for anybody that's new, I just want to repeat it. Everything that you see and hear about Eugenio Suárez is real. He's that guy. He's always got a smile for you. He's always effervescent. He's always upbeat and positive. He has his moments where he shows his frustration and all that, but he genuinely is that guy. So, everywhere he goes, they love him, and there's a reason for it. And so I just really hope that now that he's got a little bit, new stance going on and ability to get out and make contact with the ball 6 inches or a foot further in front of the plate, he can hit a few more bombs in Seattle. And I would love to see that projection be wrong about 11 more home runs. I hope he hits 25 more. I think it would be the most killer thing to see him come up to 61 home runs. So we're all Geno Suarez fans. If anybody misunderstood anything that I was saying about, evaluations and trades, please don't misread. I think he's had a heck of a year, and he's a heck of a person, and I want him to have a lot more success.
That was very well said. I think that in 10, 20 years from now, Jack, when people are asking on social media just for fun, like who's your favorite Diamondback of all time, or who are your favorite like random Diamondbacks or whatever, I think Geno Suarez's name is going to pop up a lot in those types of questions for many, many years to come. His Diamondbacks tenure was not very long. We're talking about a year and 2/3, I guess, something like 260 games. But they were memorable, and not just the big numbers that he ended with, but the storyline along the way. We've talked about it a lot here, but we were not very far last season from seeing the Diamondbacks designate Geno Suarez for assignment. That was a real thing. There's reporting behind that was at least a discussion that was going on behind the scenes. And thank goodness, Jack, that the Diamondbacks did not do that, because I cannot imagine how ugly things would have gotten around here if the D-backs had moved on from Suarez and he went on to another organization. Basically, some team, picked him up for next to nothing financially and had him go off the way that he has here over the last calendar year. As you said, it has been unbelievable to watch.
I would have been able to stomach that.
I don't think
By the
anyone
way,
would.
he was the same guy. I mean, you were in the clubhouse with us too, Jesse. And, even the first half of last year when he was struggling so much, I mean, he never acted like that. He never moped around the clubhouse. He never acted like a guy that was struggling. He'd walk in the clubhouse and shout out to teammates and shout out to media members. And, his movements were big. I mean, like just everything he did was like, yeah, life is great, man. The whole I'm lucky to be here. Very few people personified that more than Gino.
Gino finished with he's at least right now having the best season of his career. His WRC plus in 2025 is 143. And of course, he's doing that at the age of 34. So, as you said, Jack, we very much wish him all the best in Seattle. I'm sure Mariners fans are stoked to have him back. Be very funny, tuning into Mariners games and seeing both Josh Naylor and Gino Suarez. It kind of makes me think in retrospect, Jack, like, what would the package deal have looked like if the D-backs had just traded both Gino and Josh Naylor on the front end? What would the return have looked like then? Maybe they could have tapped into the Mariners top 100 list. It's kind of a moot point now. We won't go there. But just an interesting thing now that's running through my mind.
Yeah, Mike addressed that too. He felt like he would do better splitting the guys up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's hard to say if that's absolutely true. I mean, maybe they had those discussions and, okay, take them both, give me your number 2 or 3 guy or whatever, and that was off the table for Jerry DiPoto. So they went in a different direction.
Well, I'll be very curious to see what Mike Hazen says about this move. We expect that he will speak to the media at some point, probably not tonight, given that it's after 10:30 p.m. here in Arizona. Maybe sometime tomorrow morning. Maybe we wind up waiting until when the trade deadline ruckus is over and we hear his comments tomorrow afternoon on all of the deals that the D-backs have made at that point. And I think that's maybe a good place for us to finish here, Jack. It feels like a lot's going to happen tomorrow. I referenced the Gambo tweet earlier. I maybe it's not just Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly that he's referring to. Maybe there's a Jake McCarthy trade in the works. We know the Astros have had some reported interest there. And who knows what else could be happening. The D-backs are interested on the buy side as well in acquiring a controllable reliever. That's something Mike Hazen has talked about recently. So, maybe the team even brings in some real major league ready talent, a name that people are familiar with in more of a buy type of trade. So anything is possible here, Jack.
Yeah. So tomorrow, folks, come on back. We will be here tomorrow after the trade deadline ends. And we're going to wait until the last trades trickle in and then see if we get to talk to Mike. I think if we get to talk to Mike, we'll be able to bring a little bit more to you guys than just, speculation about what the team was thinking. We'll try to get it direct from the horse's mouth, why they made the moves that they did. And we'll bring all of that to you tomorrow for sure.
And I don't know, maybe if the D-backs did something like early in the day tomorrow, maybe we would go live separately and react to that as well. But who knows? Maybe all these deals wait until maybe they're all buzzer beaters and we don't really get much more D-backs news until past 3 p.m. even. We've seen that happen in years past. So as Jack said, definitely keep it locked here to Snakes Territory. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm gods, and we are all about that around here. We really appreciate all of you sticking with us here late on this Wednesday night. You can find us on social media. I am at Jesse N. Friedman. Jack is at ShoeWizard59, and our show is at Snakes Territory. Jack does a great job covering the D-backs over at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. So be sure to keep it locked over there as well for all of his analysis. Jack, do you have something to add here?
No, I just got a little bit more scouting report information on
Okay.
Locklear. We'll revisit it tomorrow.
Okay.
My phone did go off, so of course, we're all doing the same thing. Phone goes off, gotta check.
Yeah, I've never been more glued to my cell phone than the 24 hours leading up to the trade deadline. I think it's unhealthy, but life will return to normal tomorrow night. So we look forward to that.
All right, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you again all for being here. We really appreciate it. And as Jack said, we will be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.